Conasán si bhcháirde, fáilte isteach go dtí Q&A bio, bite-size Irish na mísa. So you're very welcome, friends. Welcome into this month's live Q&A from Bite-Size Irish. Smisha Ben, agus seo Niall. I'm Ben, and this is Niall. And Niall is Bite-Size's learning content developer. So he designs the online courses that our members learn from at their own pace in a relaxed and entertaining fashion. So Niall has a bit of a talent for making grammar easy to understand and pleasant to engage with. And Niall's been working on a new reference course for our members all about the noun and Panamukul in Irish. So I thought while these things were fresh in his mind, we'd get him in to answer your questions all about the noun. And it's a very broad subject, but when you start to think about it, it's something that you encounter again and again and again on your learning journey. So tá fáilte ró to Niall, conastán tú.
Good míle maigad, tá mé go bra, tá si go just a bheith rash and show. Nice to be back. Tídíh gat dinne. Sulagam go bhfuil sibh go mai. Hope you're all well. Yeah, so we just had the latest new launch of material with Bite-Size, and it was this new module on the noun in Ashta reference pack. So we're primed to talk about that tonight.
Lovely stuff. Gurmagat Niall, thanks very much. So before we get started, just to say that we welcome your questions in the chat bar on YouTube. And even if you're watching this back at a later date and you have some burning question that you need to ask that wasn't answered in the live session, if you just drop it into the comments, we do keep an eye on things and we'll do our best to get back to you sooner or later. So Ardouche, where do we start with the noun? A broad subject. So we'll start, I suppose, first of all, in Irish, all nouns are either male or female. It's just the way it is. Sometimes it's a little bit strange when you have, say, for instance, a noun like Colleen for girl being a male noun. It's counterintuitive, let's say, but nonetheless, a noun is either one or the other, which begs the question, well, is gender important in case of nouns in Irish? Niall.
Well, in a word, yes. The gender is important. It's not something that we have in English, for example. And I remember very clearly first coming across this when I started learning Irish when I was 11 years old, I guess, and being very confused about how different nouns could be masculine or feminine. But they are, and of course, it's a very common thing across lots of European languages. Most of them, I think, have gender in the language. So yeah, all nouns are considered masculine or feminine. There used to be a neuter tense as well, a third gender, but just masculine and feminine these days. And is it important? Yeah, it is. The gender affects the grammar, basically. So there'll be small differences, and you can't really avoid that. Little things like a shevu here, or other kind of different forms using na instead of an in different cases. And basically, if you don't pay attention to which gender the noun is, you'll be making some small mistakes throughout. And while communication is the most important thing, we don't want to have too many small mistakes all of the time. So in the end, yes, gender is important. And yeah.
Indeed, and it's interesting that you mentioned about how there used to be a third category of neutered nouns. So do we know what happened there? Did some of them just go into one gender and the other one went into the other? Anybody know what the process was by which that happened? Was it a formal thing, or was it something?
I'm not sure about that process, but there are some place names which have an uru, and we wouldn't expect that. If we know our rules of modern Irish, you wouldn't expect that. I grew up on the banks of Loch Ness, and Loch Ness in Irish is Loch Neachach, with a small n and a capital E. So why is there uru there? Because after a masculine noun, we would have no shevu or uru, and after a feminine noun, we have shevu. Well, the word loch, I think, used to be neuter, and it would cause uru. And there's a place in South Armagh mountain called Slieve Gullion, and that's the mountain of Cullion, as in Cuchulainn, that very same mountain. And but that's uru. There's a little G before the capital C, because I think Slieve for mountain was originally a neuter noun too. So I don't know myself the process of how that left the language, but the tiny traces, and of course, place names don't like to change over time. So that's where you get some older forms sometimes.
Interesting. Okay, so this is the thing. If nouns have one gender or another, is there any way that we can tell which gender they are? And this is something that people often ask me. And, you know, nobody really wants to walk around with a dictionary in their pocket, especially a big one. So what's the story there?
So how can we know if a noun is masculine or feminine? Well, we have lots of clues. Most of the time, we can guess pretty confidently what the gender of a noun is. So there's several clues which indicate your word is probably masculine or probably feminine. And there may be one or two exceptions out there, but really, most words are very consistent with the rules like that. So there are a few tips we can look at.
Right. And so you did a free cheat sheet on this recently.
Yes.
Which, incidentally, anybody can have if they want it. It's totally free to use and share, and you'll find it on that address there. But maybe while you're going through explaining how it is that we can tell a masculine noun from a female noun, maybe I'll stick up the cheat sheet and we can have a look at that as we go. That makes sense. Okay, then. Just see if I can find this. And there we go. So take it you can see that on the screen there, Neil.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, basically, as it says here, step 1, look at the end of the noun. So that's going to tell us if it's masculine or feminine, the end of the noun. So the first point there is that if your noun, like far, board, portan, if it ends with a broad consonant, then it's nearly always masculine. Broad consonant is a consonant R or D or N if it's next to a broad vowel. So A, O, or U, if we would have that, they're usually masculine. So that's the first group. So what happens if it's finishing with a slender consonant? Well, naturally, it's different. So Björ, Schachten, Turisk, they all finish IR, IN, ISC. I and E are the slender vowels, so they're all slender consonants there, highlighted. And yeah, those ones are typically feminine nouns. So that's nouns which end with a consonant. But what about nouns that end with a vowel? Generally speaking, these are also masculine. We have ishka, dalta, kara, all masculine nouns here.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so this is based on the course Ashta reference back, so you find more details in that course. But as I say, this cheat sheet is available for free for whatever use you like. If you want to share it with your friends or use it in a group, a learning group or anything like that, it's totally free to use. Okay, so step 2. These common groups break the rule.
Yeah, there. Although we've covered nouns that finish with a broad consonant, a slender consonant, and nouns that finish with a vowel. I mean, that's all nouns. But there are some common groups which break the rule. So although they might finish with a slender consonant, they are actually masculine, for example. So the first group here, nouns for jobs often end with IR. So ashtor, doctor, munchor, chagaskor, and so on. Now, IR is slender, like we had björ before for beer, but when it's a job, that is a masculine noun. And all of our nouns with in, of course, it's a very typical Irish form, in at the end, they are all masculine, including, as Ben already mentioned, the word cailín for girl, and bralín and shin for bed sheet. So all een words are masculine.
Yeah, and often these things that end with een are small things. Or things, a small version of things, and that's related. You get that in Spanish and Portuguese, inho, inha, and so that's
ito, I think, in some places too.
Yeah. Okay, so then we have ones that are feminine.
Yeah, again, so these are actually feminine. They finish with a broad consonant, but they're feminine. So nouns that end with og, whether that's spelled eog or ofadagy, milshog, for example, dessert, or places that end with lan. We often have long words. You know, Lauerlan is a book place, a library, and so on. Pictureland is the cinema, Auerklan theatre. They are feminine. And also, we have a lot of long words that end with acht.
Yeah.
So many words. Poblacht is one, and that is feminine. Now, they need to be longer words. There's some short words with acht, which are actually masculine, but long words.
And then there are long words with acht that are actually masculine as well. So we have to bear in mind that as Niall goes down through this, he says typically, because there are so many, there are always exceptions. So cólacht is a word now, for instance, that, if my memory serves me correctly, is masculine.
Yeah, and bunracht for constitution is also masculine. So there's a couple of exceptions always, because we wouldn't want you to be resting on your laurels at all.
We don't want to make it too easy for you. That's it. Yeah.
And there's one little more example here on this page, which is actually a feminine noun. We have abstract nouns that end with e. So they're usually based on an adjective. So crin is round, but crinne is roundness. And it's also a word we use for the universe. And lug, for example, means weak, but ligge is weakness. So there's several like that. So, yeah.
Very good. On to step 3. Other exceptions, learn as you go.
Yeah, these exceptions don't really follow a pattern, but they are just common examples, and there's a couple we've mentioned, cólacht, agus bunracht, and you just learn them as you go. There's no real pattern involved here. So ahir, buchel, they're both masculine words. Im is a masculine noun too, for butter, and down below we have some feminine nouns. Ban, Jerifur, of course, are feminine. They finish with broad nouns, with broad consonants, but of course they're feminine. Ihe, tina, laba, leine, all finish with vowels, very common words, and also me, and they're all feminine. August Banrian, queen, again, clearly referring to a woman, so feminine noun. Although cailín is a masculine, normally it does go by the gender, just not always. So
lovely. Okay, nice stuff. Lovely. Okay, so get my windows in order. Okay, so yeah, question come in there. Maybe we'll just we'll get to that question in a minute. Just have a look at question number 3 here. Cases. What are cases in terms of nouns?
Yeah, when you study Irish, you start to hear talk about cases, and ascailige tishel. That's the word for cases, tishel, and it's basically just a form of the noun, because the form of the noun can change, the spelling can change. This happens a little in English, because of course you can say the man, but then you can say the man's car, and you have apostrophe s. So why has that word changed? Well, that's indicating possession. It's the car of the man, the man's car. So it happens a little in English, but again, it's not something we have to worry about in English grammar. Maybe in a few European languages. I think I've heard from Slavic languages, I think in Eastern Europe, they still talk about cases quite a lot. And certainly back in Latin, I don't know about modern Italian or Spanish myself. But cases, different forms of the noun in different situations.
Yeah.
There are basically 3 cases that we need to worry about, 3 or 4, I suppose. The basic form of the noun is called the nominative case, and tischel animnach. That's just the basic form. If you say anfar, for example, anfar, kawal anfar, where is the man? Ta anfar anshaw, the man is here. Just the basic form. Then we have the tischel tawarha, which is called the dative case. And these forms, nominative, dative, that's what you used to talk about Latin grammar.
Mm-hmm.
And the dative case is used after a preposition. Now, in modern Irish, it doesn't change too much. For most of us, if we say with the man, for example, how would you say with the man, Ben?
Leshen var.
Leshen var. I would say leshenar.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly different because I'm from Ulster and Ben is from Munster.
Mm-hmm.
The Connacht people would also say leshen var. The only difference, folks, is that Connacht and Munster people are using uru after leshan. I'm using shevu after leshan. But apart from that, the word far doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit tricky.
But just to kind of put that in context for English speakers, what we're talking about is when we say the form or the initial letter of man is going to change, or we're talking about the man's car there. If the man was sitting on his car, then the word for his car is going to change a little bit. So this is the sort of thing we're talking about.
Yeah. So just a small change, but the big one that changes quite a lot is sometimes, depending on the word, is antishal ginajach, or the genitive case, and sometimes the word can change quite a lot. And this is the one that kind of equates to the man's car, to that form of man's.
Mm-hmm.
Often antishal ginajach is used for indicating possession, to say that you own something or the something of something. So we'll find that form there. Yeah, we also have the vocative case, antishal garamach. That is when you call somebody by name, or by title. And you could say, I could talk to my friend Cara and say, well, achara. So saying achara is talking to him.
And so people might have been a little bit confused when I said Coniston to a nail at the start. They're saying the man's name is Neil. Why is he calling Nail? So the pronunciation of some male names can alter quite radically. For instance, Neil.
Yeah. So that's 4 cases we've mentioned, and there's a little bit to learn about them, but the trickiest one is antishal ginajach, really, the genitive case. And
it manifests itself in so many different ways. This is the thing. Mm-hmm. So, antishal ginajach, we've actually done a Q&A on that in the last year, and it was covered in a fair amount of detail. So if anybody wants to have a look on YouTube for that, they'll find that was myself and Siobhan maybe 6 months ago or so. Yeah. Antishal ginajach. We get on to declensions in a minute. I want to just take a look at question here. Okay, it's more of a comment than a question. So Patchy, who's in the Isle of Tenerife, Spawn, fair play, saying, did I really hear someone describe nouns as male, female, and neutered? Yeah, if you were just coming late, I think Patchy maybe came on a few minutes late. It seems that if we go back far enough at one stage, there was a third category of nouns, oscaiga, the neutered form. We don't know a whole lot about it, but in modern Irish, we just have male and female nouns, and no neutered or neutral.
So we really don't need to worry about neuter these days. It's just masculine and feminine nouns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the genitive leads us to declensions. So first of all, what are declensions? These relate to the genitive.
Okay, yeah. What are the declensions? Declensions are just 5 categories of nouns. We put them into 5 groups because they behave in the same way as each other. So all of the nouns in the first declension, they form the genitive in the same way. all of the nouns in the second declension form the genitive singular in the same way as well, and so on. So it's just 5 groups. It can sound very off-putting, I always think, to hear big words like declension, and I've never heard the word declension outside talk of Irish grammar, so I wouldn't know what it meant in a normal conversation. But so it can be very off-putting, but it's just really it's to help you get to the answers quicker, really. Yeah.
So there are groups of nouns that are organized according to what happens to them in the genitive, not according to their gender, for instance, like we were talking about earlier.
Now, often these things are all linked, so we know clearly that such and such a noun is masculine first declension or feminine second declension. It's usually pretty clear. But do I need to know about them at first? Not really. At first, it's best to just study. But the genitive case is a big topic, and it's like you said, you've done a whole Q&A just about the genitive case before, and in the new module on the noun, there's at least 3 lessons just on the genitive case itself. So there's a lot in that topic. It's more of an intermediate subject usually when people study. So if you're a beginner, don't worry too much about it. It's coming,
Don't worry about it at all.
Yeah. Well, also it's not that hard. It's just it takes a little bit of study when you get there. But we don't start with it usually. That said, there's examples of the genitive case everywhere around us. If you've all of our place names and even family names, and nearly every sentence has examples of the genitive case. If you want to say something interesting, you are using that form, really. So it is there already. Even if you're studying at a basic level, there'll be examples of it around you. So do I need to know about declensions? I think they're really good for when you're kind of mastering the genitive case, but maybe you don't need it when you're starting out. Do you think that's fair to say, Ben?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, it's really a question of the breadth of expression and topics that you're covering in your use of Irish. A lot of the common things people learn by exposure, they don't need to consider whether or not it's one declension or another. They just know that this is how you say it because they've heard people say it. When you start maybe then to broaden out in terms of who you're speaking to, what you're speaking about, the complexity with which you want to discuss it, well, then it's more relevant. There's more than one way of learning, and certainly starting out, it's better to learn through expressions and phrases initially before you start to get into the technicality of grammar, because it's very hard to form a sentence if you're doing 10 or 20 different calculations in your mind as you go along. So it's step by step, and certainly you can learn a lot of the genitive without knowing declensions.
And of course that's not how you speak your first language, is it? You're not don't sit and think about the grammar before you talk. It just comes out, doesn't it?
This is it, but learning as an adult is a totally different thing to learning grammar as a child as well.
So I always think for the slightly trickier topics where you might need a bit more study, like let's say pronunciation or grammar, it's really, really good to have lots of good examples to hand. Phrases that so it's really nice to just know lots of nice phrases, whether that's common terms that everybody would know, or just conversational phrases, and whether it's your pronunciation or your grammar points. If you know that you know this phrase right, then that'll be a great example for you down the road when you think, oh yeah, that was a good example of this point or that point. So good to work from useful chunks of language that are phrases you want to use in conversation anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always felt that song is a great way to learn those as well. It's perhaps, as a learner, well, it can be difficult, I suppose, to find the means to learn songs, but it's quite difficult to sing a song or to recite a song without encountering an example of Fiadh Genedach.
And it stays in your head.
And every second line, well, this is it. So these things stay in your head and you can generalize from them. And or you can even just wonder why and find out, you know, when you encountered them. Yeah. Lovely stuff. So it's quite quiet on the comments front today, this evening. As I was saying at the beginning, you're welcome to send us your comments. We're dealing with the subject of nouns, quite a broad topic tonight. But as I say, you're welcome to send us your questions, and Niall and I will do our best to answer whatever it is you want to know about nouns or anything related. So yeah.
But I think it's worth mentioning again that there are when it comes to nouns, that we have a lot of nouns that fall into very typical groups. When we looked at the cheat sheet a little bit earlier, we saw some of that. For example, in. There are so many words which finish with I fada en, in, which is a suffix that means little. So they all have the same rules then. So there's, for example, there's Calleen, Bralleen, and every other in word, they'll all work the same way. They all have the same kind of plural. You just add I fada and say Calleeni, Bralleeni, and so on. They all make the genitive case in the same way, and the genitive plural. So if you know how the word Calleen works, you know how all the in words work. And that's a big group. Same with Ashtor, Doctor, just above. Like I mentioned, Munchor, no Chagascore, 2 words for a teacher. Loads of jobs have that IR ending, whether it's OIR or UI fada IR. But they all have the same patterns. They behave the same way when they're in plural or genitive. And the same is true for the other groups we saw there. Afada N, I can see there, Porton. Afada N is very common noun ending. Cupan for a cup, and so on. I'm looking for a Liaragan at the moment, a bookshelf, a bookcase, Gumaleshko. Everything's falling down here. So there's so many words with Afada N, even some names like Kiran, and they all have the same grammar, so they all work the same way. If you know how to make the plural of crab, you know how to make the plural of bookcase, for example. I'm not sure they ever come up in the same sentence so often, those 2 words. And I think down below on the second page, we have some of the other typical groups like Og and Lan and Acht. Yeah, those 3 very common groups. A lot of words with Og. Fwynog is the most typical example, classic example, window. But they have the same plural, Milshoga, Fwynyoga for the plural. And Laurlan, all the lan words for places also, they have a little a for the plural. So Laurlan, libraries. And Publicht, again, they all work the same way. So if you know one phrase with an acht word, you know quite a lot. One example I always give is the radio station here, Radio na Gaeltachta. Radio na Gaeltachta, the Gaeltacht radio. If there was a Republic radio, it'd work the same way. Instead of Radio na Gaeltachta, it would be Radio na Publichta.
Clown the Publichta on stage. Yeah.
So those typical groups are really helpful. If you know how one works, you know how they all work. And that's those patterns are really, really, really useful to you.
Oh yes, Cormac. Thanks for clearing that up. We're expanding on it. So, any questions on the noun? Anybody there? No. Okay.
I suppose the other thing to mention would be that, if you really do need to check to be sure, then, the thing to do is if you're doing some homework, let's say, or if you're doing a bit of study at home and you want to find out more, then our online dictionaries are the place to go. And they will always tell you, if it's folklore.ie or changlin.ie, those online dictionaries that we use every day, they do tell you the gender of any noun. They tell you the declension. They show you the forms in nominative and genitive, and you can see them plural as well. So you can, if you're looking around on those sites, you can find all that info. So maybe you think you know how the word public works, let's say, but you just want to check to be very sure. You can go to one of those websites or apps and get confirmation of that. Of course, we don't want to do that all the time. We don't want to do that when you're mid-flow in a conversation. So it's good to recognize these patterns. But if you ever need to be 100% certain, you can find that info there.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, you know, even if people don't know declensions in terms of when they're down the pub or whatever, that resources like that exist so that people could write with confidence if they need to write something and make sure that it's correct. It's much simpler now using those online resources than it was when you needed a sort of combination of a dictionary and a grammar book and going back and forth between the two in order to ascertain that you're on the right track. So yeah, they are great resources, but they also, I suppose, strengthen the argument that, oh, do we need to learn this? Do we need to learn that? But that's one of those things. If nobody knows the rules, what's the point in having them at all? Yeah.
Well, I suppose the rules as well. It always sounds like a scary word to say the rules, but really the rules are just observations of the pattern. You know, we don't. It's not like every word behaves a different way. Not at all. That would be impossible. So there are a lot of patterns, and the rules, as we say, are just describing what the pattern is.
This is it. Yeah, sure. That's all that grammar is at the end of the day, isn't it? A way of explaining patterns. Yeah.
It's a nice way to think of it, I think.
Lovely. We're at the nail. So all quiet on the YouTube front. So I was wondering, actually, something I was thinking about there is, you know, if you use the affix "een" to stick it on the end of a feminine noun, and rather than it being part of the noun, like milshoigin. So that's not going to change the way that the noun behaves in the genitive, is it? It's just that you're sticking "een" on the end of milshog, like milshogin. I'll have a little one.
I'm not sure. I know that that occurred to one of my students a few years ago, and he said, "Oh, we can just put "een" on everything and change every noun into
one declension."
Well, that's quite clever, but it would be very tiring to hear about public teen, you know,
Kalinin,
Farin, agus Buchalin. But "een" is the kind of it's one of my favorite little morsels of Irish, because it is something that we improvise with.
Yes, but I think a distinction does need to be made here in terms of the word that ordinarily contains this affix and one where it's just tagged on, let's say. So okay. Exiled man. I'll just stick this up on the screen. I'll get rid of this one. Okay, exiled man says, I've had a hard time confirming what is the vocative form of the name Fiadh. So this is just F-H-I-A-D-H, I think, Ia.
Yeah, the rule is for female names, they have a shevu after a, but they don't change otherwise. So if it's Sinead, Siobhan, Fiadh, we will put the H in after a and say a Hinead, a Siobhan, a Ia, or ahia, but we don't change any other part of the word. In masculine names, we change, like Ben mentioned, my name is Niall, but it changes to a Niall, so it is quite a big change there. So a feminine name, just the H, just a little a and the shevu on the first letter. Ia, I suppose.
And something that we didn't point out earlier, this only relates to Gaelic names.
Oh, yes.
In my case, I'm just Ben, and it'll be just Ben, no change on that. And then there's a sort of a convention where if there is a Gaelic version of somebody's name, if somebody's name is David, for instance, we know that the Gaelic version of David is Dahi, but you don't presume to call David Dahi unless David has indicated to you that he'd like you to call him Dahi, in which case you can start using the vocative properly. So, but otherwise it stays a David.
That was one of those things that used to happen a lot in the old days. If you had a girl called Anna, she went to school and the teacher says, "Your name is Anya," and you know,
we had some quite interesting times. Yeah, we had some quite interesting times growing up, because our names are Ben, Simon, and Joshua. They're all Hebrew names. And so various teachers would make various attempts, you know. So at one stage, my brother Joshua was a Yoshu. A Yoshu. Simon, I think fair enough. We have Simoen, so a Hemoen.
Yeah.
And then I was called a Ben at times, but in fairness, it should just be a Ben. And my brothers used to joke and call me a Boing. A Boing. So there you go. But yeah. So yeah, so sometimes people can be a little bit enthusiastic with that.
Yeah. And that point stands as well for place names. So or any kind of borrowed word, if we're not spelling it in Irish, we're not going to apply any Irish grammar to it. So like I said, I won't change someone's name. If your name is Alessandra, I'm not going to put any Uru, Shevu, or anything like that. It's not going to change. And the same with like a city like Las Vegas, for example. We're not going to try to change that. Some international cities and countries, definitely countries, but also some cities, some very famous cities historically do have an Irish language version. But if they don't, we just spell it in the most common form in the local language, I guess, and we don't put any Shevu or Uru on that. But again, sometimes words do get borrowed in with a nice Irish spelling. I've always liked the fact that words like pizza and sushi are very easy to spell in Irish. So we can spell them in Irish, and you could do the Shevu or Uru if you need to. So I'll just put those in so people can see. Sushi. Focus. Pizza. Basically, it's very easy to spell those words in a simple way that's easy to pronounce. Some other words, some other loan words could be look very complicated if we tried to write them in Irish. So sometimes we don't even bother changing the spelling. But if it's simple like that, we can do it, and then you might apply Irish grammar to it.
But again, they're not proper nouns. So we're talking about place names. So yeah, so historically, the places that abroad that tend to have Irish names are the places where people went either to work or to live from Ireland primarily. So we're talking about North America, Britain. So we've Glasgow, Carrivisto is one of my favorites, Bristol, Lairfowl for Liverpool, and then we've New Ark.
Monaghan is Manchester.
Yeah. But they tend to generally follow the shape or sound of the original word as well, which a lot of them came from the Romans anyway, I think. Well, not New York, in fairness, but maybe York.
Well, York, I think, is I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it in Latin. It's like Eboricum or something. So that B is still in the Irish spelling of York, Aurach. It was a Roman city and a Viking city and an English city. So it's a very old city, York. The old famous cities around the world, like famous in the culture here, they will have an Irish version. So Paris, Rome in Italy, and so on. But not necessarily every city in your country.
Capitals of major Catholic countries, for the most part. Yeah, very good. So, as I've said, in the course of the Q&A, you're welcome. Q&A. There's an example of it there, saying Q&A as Gaeilge, Q&A rather than Q&A. You're welcome to send us your questions, covering a very broad topic of the noun, as Gaeilge. So send us your questions if you have any, and we'll do our best to answer. While we're waiting, just to say that Bite Size Irish is a self-learning platform with a variety of different plans and means of learning, and you can have a look at our plans and the different elements of them on that address there, bitesize.irish.memberships. Or if you'd like to get a little free e-booklet just to get you started, if you want to practice a bit of Irish every day, there's some useful suggestions in that, just to give you a little bit of motivation and just some practical tips in terms of integrating that into your routine. And then again, we have a blog, and on that blog you'll find descriptions of what happens in the Q&As and the main sort of learning points from those Q&As. But we also have things like free cheat sheets, which are very useful and also free to share as well, and little quizzes and sometimes guest interviews with people who offer services that are sort of related to the Irish language and to ancestry and history and things like that as well. So they're all worth checking out, as well as the live streams on the YouTube channel. There we go.
So we had a question from Grace there.
So this is an example of one. Yeah, just stick that up. This is an example of one where there's a correct answer, and then there's also something that people tend to say that, according to the dictionary, isn't correct. So until I started writing as a journalist, as far as I was concerned, it was unind.
Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah.
Yeah, but then when I started to write about music from that country, it was on India. So
yeah, on India. And the handy thing about that word is that it doesn't break any of the rules of Irish spelling, so we don't need to change it. We have I-N-D-I, so quail, slender vowels either side there, so it doesn't break any of the conventions of Irish spelling, so we can just say on India. I also remember on ind. Was that an older way to say it, or just a colloquial way to say it?
I don't know where I heard it. It was just what I encountered until I actually went and looked in a dictionary at one stage, because I was writing about music from that country. But in fairness, on ind also adheres to the rule of quail, agus lahan, lelahan.
Of course, yeah.
And to my ear, it's nicer, I have to say, on ind.
It's my lumsa first. I like it too. I wonder where they come from.
Yeah, I'm just having a look in the dictionary here to see if there are any variations offered, but no, just on India. So we have.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for that question, Grace. In India, they call it Bharat. Fair enough. Yeah. Armagad Grace. Okay. Togama, well, in the absence of any more comments, we might just wind it up for this evening, Niall. Somebody was asking me a comment in there on YouTube during the week. Somebody saying, I know how to say Gurb Mahagut, but I'm trying to narrate a book where I need to say Gurb Mila Mahagut. How do you say Mila? So if you're watching, Gurb Mila Mahagut is how you say it. And it doesn't mean thanks a million. It means thanks 1,000. People say it seems to have entered Hiberno English as thanks a million. But yeah,
it's inflation or something, is it?
Tá go mar sin gur míle magat as na ceisna son Father Raggart agus maid son Father Vinu. Thanks, Neil. I'll be back with a different topic in roughly a month's time. Again, we'll be sending out details of that to anybody who's signed up for the bite-sized newsletter. Again, you can find all of those links to all of the different dimensions of the bite-size platform if you go to this URL here, so bitesize.irish.links. You can have a look at all the various things that we do. Okay, just check there, one more comment come in. Oh yeah, Grace, tá fáilte. Okay, lovely stuff.